The phone rang at 3:17 a.m. I fumbled in the darkness, squinting at the unknown number with a Boston area code. 3 years had passed since I'd spoken to my son. 3 years since he told me I was dead to him. "Mrs. Ramsey, this is Boston Memorial Hospital. Your son's wife is in labor with complications. We need you to come immediately." My heart stopped. There must be a mistake. My son wouldn't. "Ma'am, you're listed as the only compatible blood donor in our system. Your daughter-in-law has a rare blood type and needs an emergency transfusion. Your son requested we call you." I was already grabbing my keys, throwing clothes into a bag. The irony wasn't lost on me. The son who had disowned me now needed my blood to save his new family. "I'll be there in 4 hours," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. As I raced down the empty highway toward Boston, memories flooded back. The family dinner that shattered everything, the secrets I'd kept for decades, the look in Michael's eyes when he told me I was no longer his mother. What I didn't know then was that my blood would not only save a life that night, it would finally bring the truth to light. I raised Michael alone in our small Connecticut town after his father walked out when he was 3. Being a single mom in Fairfield County wasn't easy. It's the kind of place where 2-parent households with summer homes in the Hamptons were the norm, but we managed. I worked double shifts at the regional hospital as a nurse, scrimping and saving so Michael could have everything his friends had. Michael was always closest to my parents, especially my father, Charles. Every summer, we'd drive up to their lake house in New Hampshire, where Dad would teach Michael to fish, whittle, and fix engines. Those weeks were sacred to him. My father became the male figure Michael desperately needed, the kind of steady, dependable presence I couldn't provide alone. What Michael didn't know was that my relationship with my father was complicated at best. When I was 15, Dad lost his job at the mill and started drinking. Mom worked nights at the diner, leaving me to handle his unpredictable moods. One winter night, he threw my school project across the room in a drunken rage because I'd used his tools without permission. I stood in our kitchen, surrounded by the broken pieces of 3 weeks' work, as he told me I'd never amount to anything. But Dad got sober when Michael was born. He became a different person, patient, loving, the grandfather who never missed a Little League game. I never told Michael about those darker years. Why would I? Dad had changed, and Michael needed him. The summer Michael turned 16, we discovered my mother had been hiding stage 4 cancer. She died within months. At the funeral, Dad pulled me aside and made me promise to never tell Michael about the bad years. He was terrified of losing his grandson's respect. I agreed, though something inside me resented carrying the secret. After college, Michael met Elise during his surgical residency in Boston. She came from old New England money, the kind that has buildings named after them at Harvard. Her family embraced Michael immediately, especially her father, a prominent cardiologist who saw Michael as the son he never had. I watched my son being absorbed into their world of charity galas and sailing clubs, growing more distant from our modest life. When Michael and Elise announced their engagement, I sold my grandmother's antique wedding ring, the only valuable thing I owned, to pay for an elaborate rehearsal dinner at the yacht club Elise's family frequented. $20,000 I couldn't afford, but I wanted to contribute something meaningful. The Prescotts had already arranged for the wedding to be featured in Boston Magazine. What I didn't know then was that my father had made a grand gesture of his own. He'd promised Michael his entire savings, nearly $300,000 he'd accumulated over decades of frugal living, as a wedding gift to help with the down payment on a house in Beacon Hill. My father never told me about this arrangement. 2 weeks before the wedding, Dad suffered a massive stroke. In the hospital, semi-conscious, he kept repeating one phrase that made no sense to the nurses. "Tell her about the cabin papers." I knew exactly what he meant. In his desk at the lake house was the truth I'd kept hidden for 30 years, the reason my mother had stayed with him despite everything. The rehearsal dinner at the Harborview Yacht Club was everything I'd hoped it would be. crystal chandeliers reflected off the harbor waters visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. The waitstaff served lobster bisque and champagne to guests in summer linens and navy blazers. I'd even splurged on a new dress, navy blue with a modest neckline, trying to fit in among Boston's elite. Michael barely spoke to me that evening. He was busy charming Elise's relatives, laughing too loudly at her father's sailing stories. When he did acknowledge me, it was with that particular smile, polite but distant, that he'd perfected since moving to Boston. I tried not to take it personally. This was his night, after all. "Your son is quite the catch," whispered a woman I recognized as Elise's aunt. "The Prescotts are thrilled. They were worried she'd never settle down after that unpleasantness with the Lowell boy." I nodded, unsure how to respond. I knew nothing about any Lowell boy. "Such a shame about your father," she continued, sipping her champagne. "Michael mentioned the inheritance will still go through, though. That's something." My glass froze halfway to my lips. Inheritance? The woman's eyes widened. Oh dear, perhaps I've spoken out of turn. Before I could press further, Elisa's father clinked his glass for attention. Dr. Prescott stood tall in his tailored suit, silver hair catching the light, as he spoke about welcoming Michael into their family. "Some men search their whole lives for a worthy successor," he said, his hand on Michael's shoulder. "I found mine in Michael." Applause rippled through the room. I clapped mechanically, watching my son beam with pride. "And while Charles couldn't be with us tonight," Dr. Prescott continued, "his generosity toward these young people's future will not be forgotten." I felt the room tilt slightly. What generosity? Dad was in a rehabilitation center, barely able to speak. After dinner, I pulled Michael aside near the coat check. What was Dr. Prescott talking about regarding Grandpa's generosity? Michael shifted uncomfortably. "It's nothing, Mom, just something between Grandpa and me." "Michael, your grandfather can barely remember his own name right now. What arrangement did you make with him?" My son's expression hardened. "He's giving us his savings for our house. He offered months ago. It's not a big deal." $300,000 isn't a big deal? That's everything he has. And he never mentioned it to me, his only child? Michael lowered his voice. "Because he knew you'd react exactly like this. It's his money, Mom, his choice." "He's not in his right mind anymore. You know that." "The arrangement was made before his stroke. It's all documented." As we argued, I noticed Elise watching us from across the room, her perfect features arranged in a mask of concern. She glided over, placing a proprietary hand on Michael's arm. "Everything okay over here?" Her voice was honey-sweet, but her eyes were calculating. "Fine," Michael said quickly. "Mom's just concerned about Grandpa's gift." Elise's smile tightened. "It was very generous of him. We've already put a deposit on the Beacon Hill brownstone." "I'd like to speak with my father about this," I insisted. "He's made his wishes clear," Michael said. "The paperwork is with his lawyer." I thought of my father's repeated phrase in the hospital, the cabin papers. The lake house deed was in my mother's name, not his. Another secret I'd kept for him. "Michael," I said quietly, "there are things about your grandfather you don't know." "Like what?" His tone was dismissive. "Like the fact that the lake house isn't even his to sell. It's Mrs. Ramsey." Dr. Prescott appeared suddenly, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "I've been meaning to ask you about your hospital work. Michael tells me you're quite dedicated." The conversation was deftly redirected, but I caught the warning glance between Michael and Elise. Something was very wrong. Later that night, as guests were leaving, I overheard Elise in the ladies' room, speaking to her maid of honor. "Can you believe she wore that dress? So suburban." Elise's laugh was brittle. "Michael's already arranged to limit her involvement in the wedding. Thank God his grandfather's money will help us move farther away." I stood frozen in the stall, my chest tightening with each word. "What about the old man's condition?" her friend asked. deteriorating fast, which is honestly convenient. The lawyer says as long as he signed everything before the stroke, we're golden. The wedding day arrived with perfect New England autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunlight filtering through red and orange leaves at the historic Trinity Church in Copley Square. I sat alone in the third row on the groom's side, painfully aware of the empty spaces where family should have been. Dad was too ill to attend, and with no other relatives, the contrast between our sparse representation and the Prescott's packed section was stark. During the ceremony, I watched my son pledge his life to Elise, feeling strangely detached. When the minister asked if anyone objected, I felt a momentary impulse that I quickly suppressed. This wasn't about me. The reception was held at the Boston Public Library, its marble halls transformed with white roses and candlelight. I nursed a single glass of champagne, watching Michael move through the crowd without once glancing my way. I'd become a stranger in my son's life. When dinner concluded, Dr. Prescott rose for his toast. He spoke eloquently about legacy and family traditions, then raised his glass. And though Charles Ramsey couldn't be with us today, his contribution to the young couple's future home honors the Ramsey family name for generations to come. Something snapped inside me. Perhaps it was the 3 sleepless nights at Dad's bedside, or the memory of selling my grandmother's ring for a dinner that no one had even thanked me for. Whatever the catalyst, I found myself on my feet before I could reconsider. "I'd like to say something," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. Michael's face drained of color. Elise's lips thinned to a hard line. "The Ramsey name," I began, "carries more history than most of you know. My father, Michael's beloved grandfather, built his reputation in our town through decades of hard work. What many don't know is what that reputation cost our family." "Mom," Michael warned, half rising from his seat. I continued as if I hadn't heard him. "When I was 15, my father lost his job and became an alcoholic. For 3 years, he terrorized our home. He broke my arm when I tried to stop him from hitting my mother. He threatened to burn down our house when the bank sent foreclosure notices." Shocked murmurs rippled through the guests. Elise's mother pressed a hand to her throat. "The only reason we kept our home was because my mother secretly took out a life insurance policy and named me as the beneficiary. She used that money to buy the New Hampshire lake house, putting it in her name, not his. That lake house that my father has apparently promised to sell to finance your Beacon Hill dreams, Michael, it isn't his to give. The deed is in my name. It has been since Mom died." Michael stood now, his face contorted with anger and embarrassment. "That's enough." "No, it's not," I said. "For 30 years, I've protected your grandfather's reputation. I let you believe he was perfect because he asked me to, because he was genuinely a better man by the time you knew him. But he had no right to promise you money that isn't his, and you had no right to make arrangements behind my back." I pulled an envelope from my purse and held it up. "These are the cabin papers Dad's been talking about in the hospital. The deed transfer my mother arranged before she died. The lake house is mine, not his." The room had fallen into stunned silence. Dr. Prescott was whispering urgently to his wife. Elise's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You're ruining everything," Michael hissed, striding toward me. "Is that what you wanted, to humiliate me in front of everyone?" I met his gaze steadily. "No, I wanted you to know the truth about where you come from. We're not perfect. We've never had money or status, but I have never lied to you or used you." "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're no longer my mother." I nodded slowly, suddenly calm. "If that's what you want." As I walked out of that beautiful library, past the shocked faces of Boston's elite, I felt a strange mix of devastation and liberation. Behind me, I heard Elise's controlled voice trying to salvage the reception, suggesting the string quartet begin playing again. In the taxi, I called the nursing home where Dad was staying. "I told him," I said, simply, when the night nurse put him on. "I told Michael everything." Through the phone, I heard my father's labored breathing, then 3 clear words. "It's about time."
I left Boston the next morning and never looked back. I resigned from my nursing position in Connecticut and accepted a job offer I'd been considering at a rural medical center in northern Michigan. It was as far from New England as I could reasonably go while still practicing medicine. I needed distance, from the memories, from the humiliation, from the son who no longer wanted me in his life. The lake house remained empty. I couldn't bring myself to sell it, despite its value having increased substantially over the years.
It held too many complicated memories, both the childhood summers Michael treasured and the darker history that preceded them. I paid the property taxes and hired a local service to check on it monthly. Dad passed away 6 weeks after the wedding. I was the only one at his funeral. Michael didn't return my calls informing him of his grandfather's death. The inheritance Dad had promised Michael didn't exist. His savings account held less than $17,000, most of which went to his final medical expenses. I wondered if Michael and Elise had already spent money they assumed was coming. In Michigan, I slowly built a new life. The small-town hospital valued my experience, and within a year, I was heading the emergency nursing department. I rented a cabin on Lake Superior where I would sit on crisp mornings watching the sunrise over water that seemed to stretch forever. I made a few friends, other transplants who didn't ask too many questions about why a middle-aged woman had moved across the country alone. 18 months after I left New England, I received a letter from an unexpected source, Elise's younger sister, Caroline. Unlike her polished, calculating sister, Caroline had seemed genuinely warm during our few interactions. Her letter was brief but revelatory. "Michael and Elise's marriage is struggling," she wrote. "The house they put a deposit on fell through when the promised money didn't materialize. Elise's parents helped them buy a smaller place in Cambridge, but Michael hates being indebted to them. He's drinking too much. When he's drunk, he talks about you and the lake house. I thought you should know." I folded the letter and put it away. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, only a distant sadness for what might have been. I didn't respond to Caroline. Life continued. I dated occasionally, nothing serious until I met James, a widowed doctor who'd moved to Michigan to be closer to his daughter and grandchildren in Traverse City. He was kind and straightforward, with none of the status anxiety that had infected my son's world. When he asked me to marry him after 2 years, I said yes without hesitation. 3 days before our small wedding, my phone rang with a Boston area code. I nearly didn't answer. "Mom?" Michael's voice sounded different, rougher, less confident. "I heard you're getting married." News travels fast in small towns. "Yes," I replied, unsure what else to say. "Are you happy?" he asked, the question so unexpected that I felt tears spring to my eyes. "I am," I answered honestly. There was a long pause. "I'm not," he finally said. "Elise and I are divorcing. Her father got me fired when I refused to join his private practice. I'm not doing well." I closed my eyes, absorbing the pain in his voice. "I'm sorry to hear that. The things you said at the wedding about Grandpa, were they true?" "Yes, all of it." Another silence stretched between us. I found some of his old journals when I was cleaning out his apartment. He wrote about those years, about what he did to you and Grandma. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "He asked me not to. He wanted to be your hero." "But you let me idolize someone who hurt you?" His voice cracked. "You let me choose him over you? You were a child who needed a male figure in your life. He was genuinely better with you than he ever was with me. People can change, Michael." I heard him take a shaky breath. "I need to change. I'm not proud of who I am anymore." "Change is possible," I said gently. "I've seen it happen." "Would you," he hesitated, "the lake house, is it still there?" "Yes, I never sold it." "Could I maybe stay there for a while, just to figure things out?" I thought about the painful memories that place held, but also the possibility of new ones. "Yes, the keys are with Johnson's Realty in town. I'll call and let them know you're coming." 3 days later, I married James in a simple ceremony on the shores of Lake Superior. As we exchanged vows, I felt my phone vibrate in the pocket of my dress. I checked it later. A text from Michael with a photo of the lake house at sunset and 4 words: "Thank you for everything." It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. 6 months later, James and I visited the lake house. Michael had been living there, working remotely as a medical consultant while in recovery. The tense reunion gradually warmed as we spent the weekend fishing and rebuilding the old dock together. On our last night, Michael showed me something he'd found hidden in the walls during some repairs. A letter my mother had written to me before she died, explaining why she had put the lake house in my name. "So you'll always have a home that's truly yours," she'd written, "no matter what happens." I gave the letter to Michael. "This belongs to both of us now," I told him. "This place is our family legacy, the good parts and the difficult ones." 2 months later, my phone rang at 3:17 a.m. with news that would bring everything full circle. I stood in the hospital room watching my son cradle his newborn daughter. My blood still flowed through her tiny body, the emergency transfusion that had saved both her and Elise during a complicated delivery. Some bonds, it seems, transcend even the deepest rifts. "Her name is Grace," Michael told me, his eyes never leaving her face, "after Grandma." Life doesn't give us perfect resolutions, just opportunities to write new chapters. Our family story now includes the lake house, where Michael lives and works as a telemedicine physician, helping rural patients across northern Michigan. Elise shares custody of Grace, her own priorities shifted by motherhood. James and I visit monthly, building the kind of extended family I never thought I'd have again. The truth I learned through all of this is that family isn't just about blood relations or shared history. It's about who chooses to stay when staying gets difficult. It's about the courage to speak painful truths and the grace to begin again after those truths have been told. Some days, when I hold my granddaughter by the lake that holds so many layers of our family story, I think about how close we came to losing each other forever, how one phone call in the darkest hour changed everything. If you're struggling with family wounds that seem unhealable, remember that time and truth have healing powers we can't imagine in our darkest moments. The bridges we burn can sometimes be rebuilt, stronger than before. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories of family reconciliation and second chances. Sometimes the most powerful words we can share are simply, "I'm here. Let's try again."